Hello everyone, welcome to Straight Talks F1. It's been a while since I've done a podcast episode. The winter break is really kicking in. We are still a month and a half away from the season start, with the Australian Grand Prix scheduled in the middle of March. So I thought let's look back at some of the iconic races in Australia. And I found out about a championship decider. Yes, you heard it right. A championship decider in Australia back in 1986. Now, this is a famous one, but not something that pops up in our mind immediately when we talk about championship deciders, exciting, thrilling finale races. Because championship deciders that are deemed exciting are often controversial. You take 1994, 2021, 1997, 89, 90. All of them had a lot of controversy with crashes, safety car chaos, and whatnot. But the 1986 season finale was pure excitement and it went down to the wire. It was the Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide, not Melbourne. Adelaide was the home of the Australian Grand Prix before Melbourne came along in 1996. And back then, Adelaide used to host the season finale. It was a street circuit, hosted F1 for only 10 years, but became a fan favorite. People love to watch racing in Adelaide. And to have a three-way battle for the championship to be decided in Adelaide, it was heavenly for F1 fans. Nigel Mansell, Nelson Piquet, Alain Prost separated by only 7 points before the final race. Mansell was the leader with 70 points, Prost with 64 points in second place, and Mansell's teammate Piquet with 63 points. So it was all set up for an epic conclusion. So let's get into it how it was an agonizing loss for Mansell, who could have won his maiden title if it wasn't for that tire puncture that helped Alain Prost become a two-time world champion. Now, back in the day, the championship was decided by taking into account only the top 11 finishes for all drivers, and even the point system was quite different. Only 9 points were awarded to the winner instead of the current 25, 6 points for second place, and then 4 points for third place, 3, 2, and 1 each for the drivers finishing 4th to 6th. Only the top 6 drivers scored. So there was a lot of value that Mansell had a 6-point lead heading into the finale. Now, that being said, the reliability in the retirement rate was also high back then. Any sort of issue in the engine, in the turbo, the tires imploding due to punctures, all these issues could cause high rate of DNFs. That is why the finale was so hyped up with 3 drivers in contention and any of them had the chance to become the champion. Now, Mansell only needed a P3 finish. He needed to get that podium to take the world championship, irrespective of what Prost and Piquet did. Meanwhile, Prost needed to win the race, with Mansell finishing 4th or 5th, and Piquet obviously needed to win, with Mansell finishing 6th at best. So it was a steep task, and all in all, the odds seemed in Mansell's favor. Now, to give some background on this championship battle, it was actually Nelson Piquet who was leading the championship in the initial rounds of the season. Switching from Brabham to Williams, he was basically their lead driver, the two-time world champion, with Prost having only the world championship in 85. Many would have thought Piquet would be the favorite to win the title. And the way the Williams car was dominating that season, Prost was there maximizing the McLaren's potential, but he got lapped by both Williams drivers multiple times throughout that season. Now, as the season progressed, Piquet did lose ground. Mansell and Prost climbed up the standings, and Mansell in particular was in a championship winning position in Mexico. He only needed a P4 finish in that race, which was the penultimate round before Australia. But he dropped back at the start of the race, and that did not help his cause. He had to recover, got to P5 while Piquet was leading, who himself suffered a suspension issue. As I said earlier, This was an era where a lot of failures happened. Be it a suspension, an engine, a turbo, the tires itself, anything could break or falter. So Piquet fell back to fourth, and Mansell was basically pushing so that Piquet could move over. But obviously, even Piquet wanted to win the world championship. There was no chance he was moving over, and amid this chaos between the Williams drivers, Prost was the one to gain as he finished second, keeping the title battle alive till the final race. Still heading into Australia, Mansell was in a good position. Now, starting off pole position, Mansell looked good. He took the race lead. He stayed in the top four even though he lost the lead later on to keep his title hopes alive. It was a long race, an 82 lap race around a 3.7 kilometer circuit. It was Keke Rosberg, who was Alain Prost's teammate, in the other McLaren, who was leading the race. Even Piquet and Prost had gained places to stay in the hunt, but then a puncture happened for Prost. Now, this wasn't the championship deciding puncture. Fortunately for Prost, the Frenchman had to pit around lap 35 with his right front puncture, and this was an early stop for him. An early second stop with a lot of the race remaining. He was losing track position, he lost a lot of ground to Piquet and Mansell, but things were going to sway in his favor later. At that moment, with a 17-second pit stop, rather sluggish even by today's standards, Prost was basically out of the championship picture with Mansell and Piquet up front. Now, McLaren and Williams had the same tire supplier, Goodyear. So, when Prost had that puncture, Williams would have had a reference point to have a cautionary pit stop for both of its drivers. But Williams decided against that. They trusted on the pre race data that those tires can last the race distance, which basically proved to be a critical decision because later in the race, tragedy started to strike. First, it was the other McLaren of Rosberg that gave up on its right rear tire. Rosberg had to retire around lap 63 with around 15-17 laps remaining. It was a critical DNF because it freed up more points for the championship trio, and Prost in particular was gaining. He had the fresher rubber, so he was gaining on the Williams duo. He even passed Mansell for second place. Now that did not affect Mansell much because all he needed was the P3 finish and he was looking good to secure the title. With around 15 laps remaining, it was always risky for Williams to pit Mansell and lose track position. Still, they decided to make that decision because at that moment, if the race had finished in that order, with Piquet winning, Prost second, and Mansell third, Mansell would have won the title by 2 points ahead of Piquet, with Prost 2 points further behind. But on the safer side, Williams decided to pit. Now it would have been all fine. Mansell could have come into the pits, pit for fresher tires, and then came out back to secure P3 and win the title. But destiny had other plans for him. As Mansell was coming into the pits on that end lap, his right rear tire imploded down a straight and Mansell started to lose control of his car. It all unraveled for the Briton. The tire wear on those Goodyears did not spare him. He somehow got the car in a safe place in the runoff area, but he knew that it was game, set, and match for the championship in Prost's favor. It was awful because Williams had been the form team. Both of its drivers had been magnificent throughout that season. And Mansell could have been world champion in Mexico itself had he not botched up that race start. But yeah, that's how it all unfolded in the 80s. Nothing was certain. Anything could happen. An engine failure, tire failure. That could have been Mansell's maiden world title. The way Williams cars were starting to peak in that era, and given how Piquet won the championship a year later. Nevertheless, it was the hand fate dealt him. With Mansell out, it was down to two men, Piquet and Prost. Yes, Piquet still had a chance, but Williams once again decided to play it safe and bring Piquet in. And obviously, it was logical looking at the other car lose out the championship due to a tire failure. They did not want the same thing to happen to Piquet, which is why they pitted him, but they knew that they were ceding the race lead to Prost, who was on rather fresher tires. And Prost was obviously treading a fine line because he had stopped rather early in the race. Still, he managed to take that win and the World Championship for the second year running, beating both of the Williams drivers. It was epic to see Alain Prost triumph in that manner, coming from behind, beating the favourites in a rather famous and chaotic season finale, which, as I said earlier, doesn't pop up in our minds often. Mansell obviously won a dominant championship with Williams itself in 1992, but that was agonizing to lose out on the maiden title in 86. And he could have won multiple times, honestly. Besides that dominant title of 92, which was his only world championship, Mansell could have been a multiple world champion like Piquet. The way Williams were just impeccable in the mid 80s and 90s, I feel Mansell could have been a 3 time world champion easily. So it was unfortunate, but that's how life in F1 was. Prost himself went on to win a title with Williams, his last title in 1993, and uncannily, that was as Mansell's successor at Williams. Mansell left after 92, and Prost joined Williams to take a dominant title in 1993. They never shared any animosity, Prost and Mansell, despite their tussle in 86, because there was no controversy there. It was just pure racing action, and the chaos did not have any sort of collision or crashes amongst them. In fact, they even were teammates in 1998 Ferrari. But yeah, that's how the championship went down to the wire in 1986 in Australia. And it may sound quite bizarre and unique because we know the Australian Grand Prix as the season opener nowadays. But Adelaide used to be the finale, quite unlike Melbourne. And the reason for that is simple, because of the Australian summer happening during the European winter, the opposite climate of the northern hemisphere. So if F1 had to race down under, it was only possible in the initial 3 months of the year or the last 3 months of the year. But yeah, it gave an epic championship decider, a finale that Prost, Mansell, Piquet, McLaren, Williams, everyone will remember for ages. The tire puncture for Mansell helping Prost win a second world championship. There couldn't be a better script for a memorable finale to a championship battle in F1. So that's all from mine in this episode. I wanted to revisit an old season finale, and I felt the 86 Australian Grand Prix was the perfect one. I'll try to revisit couple of more epic races before the season begins. But yeah, until then, arigato and stay tuned.